Okay, so just to recap where we're at right now with the club project, we've got 3 barrels out in the shed. I had ice water frozen in bottles, keeping it cool. So that we've cold soaked now since Saturday. It's now Tuesday at dinner time. So there's a good solid 3 days. The temperature is now coming up and has not yet started to ferment. If the temperature is not warm enough by tonight, I'm going to leave it. And what I'll probably do is just spritz a little sulfite on top of it and purge the headspace with CO2. I'll show you that later. But right now what we're going to do is give it a good stir. We're going to add Opti Red. There's different products out there for doing similar purposes. Opti Red goes with the Color Pro and Color X that I added at the crusher destemmer. And basically those enzymes help break down the skins. And this, I believe, is a yeast derivative. And the Opti Red stitches it back together into long chain proteins so that they're more stable, so that not only getting more color and more flavor and more tannins, but it's more residual in the wine. So what I've found works really good. This stuff you can't just sprinkle it on top and mix it in or it'll settle out. You have to make it into an emulsification. So I've got the Jamie Oliver salad dressing mixer, and this stuff is added by weight. Just follow the instructions. So that's got a little ceramic ball inside, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water and gently stir it. I don't want to be too harsh with it because I don't want to break things down. I just want to mix it, and as you can see, that's been about a half an hour now. It's not settling out, and I'll pour that on top of the grapes and stir it in. So just a little bit of action like this, and you don't have to stir very long. You shouldn't froth it, just emulsifies it. It's a really good candy for this purpose. I recommend getting it. Okay, so just a couple of notes about where we're at. I've mixed up the Opti Red, which I'm going to be adding soon, and I'm going to stir that in. And as I stir, if I find any green stemmy matter, I want it out of there. Primarily because this is Cab Sauv. Cabernet Sauvignon is particularly susceptible to that green stemminess, and so I like to slowly get all of that green stem out of there over the period of the fermentation. It's probably 95% clean now, which again, that's part of the art of winemaking. Some people might like to leave all those stems in, but it hasn't started fermenting yet. Got a thermometer in here. Haven't stirred it yet either, so we're looking at about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be somewhere like 15 degrees Celsius. Now I'm going to stir it. That should give us a better idea of what the overall temperature is, and then we'll go from there. It needs to be a little bit warmer than that to start the fermentation. You'll notice on most winemaking thermometers there's a little red zone to guide you. That is a good starting point for your yeast. It's a good healthy temperature range, but each yeast will have its own minimum and maximum temperature that's available from the manufacturer. That information is available there. And once we get the ferment going, we're going to bring this up to about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius. And the reason for that is to help with the color extraction and getting the nice healthy yeast culture and the nice healthy enzyme culture that's going to be vibrant in there and go right to finish. And as soon as we get it up to 85, then we're going to turn the heat off and let it come back down into that cooler range, so that most of the fermentation will be done in that normal 70 to 75 degree range, so that it's not as violent and you're maintaining some of the aromatics. If you have a very rapid fermentation, it's going to blow all that good smell out of the wine. But you do want to get the temperature up in the first half of alcoholic conversion. I find anything after half the sugar's been consumed starts producing bitter tastes in the wine. So if you have it too warm. So before we get to half the sugar conversion to alcohol, we're going to turn that heat off and let it drop back down into the low 70s. So here's our Opti Red that we mixed up with the Jamie Oliver salad dressing mixer, and as you can see, that's still mixed in. I hardly shook it at all. If you don't use that thing, it is hard to get that stuff to turn into anything other than a clay-like paste. So I'm just going to pour that in. I add this at a rate of 2 grams for every 25 pounds of fruit. And then I've got my potato masher, available at your kitchen store. When I first started making red wine, one of my biggest complaints from wine judges was not enough fruit. So this whole process of the cold soak, putting the whole clusters in there, using the enzymes, that's all to get more fruit, and it really does work. So while we're waiting for the temperature to stabilize in that thermometer, let's talk a little bit about protecting the grapes at this stage. Some people are worried about the grapes going moldy or getting oxidized by letting them sit this long. You can, I've seen people put dry ice on top of their grapes. That helps keep the temperature down. It also keeps a blanket of carbon dioxide on top of the grapes. You could purge the headspace with carbon dioxide. A little bit of oxygen at this phase is good, because if you infuse the oxygen into the must, it's going to encourage a healthy yeast. So what I do is I go visually, and I always smell. Anything that smells off sets off alarm bells. And if you see mold, that should too. So you could easily just scrape that little tiny bit off the top and throw it out, and give it a quick little sulfite. You want to be careful adding sulfite at this phase, because if you plan on doing a malolactic fermentation later, it's very sensitive to sulfite, so you have to keep your levels down. But as necessary, you're going to have to do it. Let's have a look. Okay, so yeah, 55. It's not quite where I want it to be for fermentation yet, so I'm going to hold off on pitching the yeast. Alright, since I've got everything open, I think I'll also get a sample and do some numbers. Now that it's been 3 days since we crushed them, it's most likely that all the raisins have inflated and given off some sugar, and sort of broken down enough that you get a better representation of the actual amount of sugar and the amount of acid that's in the wine. So I'm expecting these numbers to be the actual numbers. And from there, we might have to adjust. Also, I'd like to talk about natural fermentation at this point. Now that the grapes are warming up, there's good potential for fermentation to start on its own. There's all kinds of yeasts blowing through the air, and there would be yeasts that would be indigenous to the vineyard where this was grown. And some people, lots of professional winemakers, they let the grapes ferment on their natural yeasts. And they can do quite well with it. For me, it's a bit of a crapshoot, just because it's transported all the way from the vineyard to a storehouse where it comes in contact with grapes from other vineyards, and then it's on a truck. It's a refrigerated truck, but it still comes all the way here. Who knows what environments it may be exposed to between the vineyard and my house. So rather than take a chance on letting the entire fermentation go with natural yeast, I usually let the natural yeast start, and I'll let it go to 1 or 2% of alcohol conversion, just to add some complexity before I can pitch my yeast. And the cultured yeasts, they're a lot more aggressive and strong, and they will take over in no time. Okay, I've rerun the numbers on the calf project, and it's not far off from what I got on the first day. Let's see, Brix was 25 and a quarter, 25.25 maybe. pH 4.26 and T8 8 grams per liter. So we're going to have to bring that pH down and deal with the acid later. So based on my notes from the rosé that I made from my own Tempranillo a few days ago, I am going to put 5 liters of water with 300 grams of tartaric acid in each barrel. And what I'm hoping is that will bring the Brix down to 24, and I'm hoping the pH will be somewhere in around 3.6, 3.65, something to that effect. It may take a little bit of stirring before I get a good balanced read, but I'll run the numbers again just to see how close I got, and we should be ready. Should be ready for fermentation. What I've got here is a fairly good sized transfer hose, and I filled this bucket with water a couple of days ago and sealed it up so that I could let the chlorine that they add at the pumping station dissipate. My understanding is it leaves the pumping station at 0.63 parts per million chlorine. So some of that should have come off. You don't want any chlorine in your wine. And I'm getting close to 7 liters. I went too far. I'm going to have to fix that. But as you can see, I've marked the gradient on the side of the bucket, so that it makes it a little bit easier if you're paying attention. Anyway, I'll fix that. And I'm going to add my acid, and I'm going to stir that and make sure it's mixed in here before I add it to each barrel. Added the acidated water, and I poured 7 liters in there, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it, because you're never 100% certain how much volume you've got when it's all mixed in with the grapes. It's not until after you press that you know what your actual volume is. So I went with 7 liters, and I thought I'd go low on the acid addition. I went with 200 grams, just because you can always add more. It's harder to take it out. What did we end up with? Well, Brix is at 23, not 24. So that gives us a potential alcohol of 13.25%. You know, that's decent. But what I'll do is, because we want probably closer to the 14%, I'm definitely going to, in the other 2 barrels, I'm only going to put 5 liters of water. And I'll check in between just a minute, I might adjust that again. And the pH I got was 3.55, so that's a little bit lower than what I would expect, but still in a good range. Definitely something that we can use malolactic later on to calm that down. And with all the acid that's in there, because of the already high levels of acid, mallow is definitely a good option. So I think what I'm going to go with is a little bit less. I'm going to go with 150 grams in 5 liters of water for the next barrel, and I'll see how that turns out. So I've played with it a little bit in between each barrel. I started with barrel number 2, added 7 liters of water with 300 grams of acid. The pH dropped to 3.55-ish, and the Brix dropped to 23, sorry. Then on barrel number 3, I added 5 liters of water and 150 grams of acid. Sorry, 130 grams of acid. And that dropped the pH to 3.7 and the Brix to 24. And then on barrel number 1, I went with 4 liters of water and 160 grams of acid. And that was bang on. Our Brix is 24, and just under 24, 23 and a half. That should give us 14% alcohol. And the pH was 3.6. So the higher and lower barrels will balance each other out just nicely. And I'll keep those numbers in mind when I'm pitching the yeast as to which yeast would be most suited for each environment. And I'm going to update my chalkboard so that and update my notebook, and that way everything is kept straight. Okay, quick recap. It's now October 11th, Tuesday, and the grapes have been sitting crushed and destemmed for 3 days. Added up the red today, and stirred in some acidated water until I brought the pH and the Brix into a better range for a nice wine. And temperature right now is holding steady at about 55 Fahrenheit, and I'm going to cover them. I'll leave them to cold soak for another day, and we'll get the temperature up on Thursday morning and start the fermentation then. And like I said, if we get a little bit of natural fermentation happening between now and then, I don't see that as being a problem. Nose knows. Smell your wine every day.